Malaysia, India, and Indonesia. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Isaac. I think Prof. Sam and probably Nesh already know me. And I will be moderating the session today. And I'm glad to welcome our honorable guest speakers, Professor Dinesh Raghavan from Vellore Institute of Technology, VIT, India. Architect Tushara K from Avani Institute of Design, AVIT, and Dr. Technologist Andi Abida from Universitas Negeri Makassar, UNM, and technologist Dr. Lang Pao Chung from University Technology Malaysia. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to UTM, VIT, AVID, UNM lecturers and the students for joining our international webinar today. So before we begin, let me explain in brief regarding the procession of our event today. To initiate our event today, we are going to have a welcoming remark by UTM Program Director, Dr. Elisa Sabrina, and followed by our sharing session with our guest speakers invited today. Our first speaker, Professor Dinesh Raghavan from VIT with the title Chola Architecture in Tamil Nadu, India. Our second speaker, Architect Tushara from Avani Institute of Design with the title Reinterpreting the Cultural Landscape of Kerala, an Academic Approach. And our third speaker, Dr. Technologist Andi Abdullah with a sharing on history and legacy of old city architectural and cultural heritage, case study Makassar, Indonesia. And finally, our in-house homemade speaker, Dr. Technologist Lang Pao Chung on the impact of solar chimney for stack ventilation in Malaysia house. Subsequently, we are going to have a Q&A session with the speakers for around 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the number of questions received before we end our session today. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome and invite UTM Architecture Program Director, Associate Professor Dr. Elisa Sabrina Ismail for the welcoming remarks. Please welcome Dr. Ellis, and the room is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Isaac. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, good morning, welcome, selamat datang, vanakkam. Okay, today is a very special day for the international webinar organized by the UTM Architecture School, because this international webinar will be the finale and the closing for all the international webinar series in UTM Architecture School, because as after this, there will be no such event to be held perhaps in online, but will be held it face to face. So today's finale event is special because we have the participation of 3 countries. We have Malaysia, Indonesia, and also India. So it is such a privilege to have 4 prominent speakers who are experts in various fields encompassing historiography, we have culture, sustainable environment, and representing case studies from 3 countries, which is India, Malaysia, and also Indonesia. So with this, I would like to say thank you so much to Prof. E.S. Dinesh Raghavan from Vellore Institute Technology. It's great to see you back again after the UTM visit to VIT. VIT had actually shown a very wonderful hospitality in which we will cherish the beautiful memories that we have in Vellore. To Architect Tushara from Avani Institute of Design, it's a pleasure of meeting you for the first time, and we really look forward of having collaborative activities with AVID in the future. And to Dr. Technician Andi Abida, thank you so much. We meet again after yesterday's session. Terima kasih Ibu. And I do really hope that Universitas Negeri Makassar akan terus kolaborasi bersama ya. And also to TS Dr. Lang Pao Chung, the sharing on sustainable environment on Malaysia case study will be fruitful to all, especially the students. So today's final international webinar will be actually an eye-opener to all, because in developed and well-developed countries throughout the world, the issue of heritage, society, and sustainable environment are crucial, which actually needs further attention to be addressed by all at various levels, from policymakers to the society, including academicians. So without further ado, I hope that today intellectual discourse will actually provide the best option, the best platform and approaches for academicians, especially students, to give their best ideas and understanding a lot of inputs and knowledge based on all that is shared today to improve the quality and life and the way how we live in. So I wish every speaker the very best. Good luck to everyone, and I hope to see all of you again in the future. So thank you so much, and good luck and the best luck to all. Thank you. So I pass it back to you, Dr. Isaac.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ellis, for the welcoming remark. And now I think it's time for me to invite our speakers, starting with my good friend, Prof. Dinesh Raghavan, all the way from Vellore Institute of Technology, VIT, with a sharing titled Chola Architecture in Tamil Nadu, India. But before that, for the audience, should you have any question to our speakers, please type in your question in the chat box section at the bottom right corner of the Webex window, and I will read your question later during the Q&A session after the sharing session by the speakers. And also, for the reminders to the speakers, I think you guys have to introduce yourself a little bit, because I wasn't informed about your, your introduction about yourself. So I think the speakers need to introduce themselves before they start with their sharing session. And without further ado, I think I would like to invite Prof. Dinesh Raghavan for the sharing. And please welcome Prof. Dinesh, and the room is yours.
Thank you, Professor Isaac. Let me share my screen.
Okay, Prof. Dinesh.
Is my screen visible?
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Alice, Dr. Isaac, for inviting me for this talk. And to introduce myself, I'm architect Dinesh Raghavan I'm an associate professor at the School of Architecture, Vellore Institute of Technology, Vellore, India, Tamil Nadu, India. And I did my master's in digital architecture, but my PhD is towards heritage, so materials and construction techniques of heritage structures, which has a blend on digital technologies too. So this is about myself, and without getting delay, I'll get into my presentation. So my topic today was on the Chola architecture of Tamil Nadu, India. I just tweeted my topic as the journey of Indian history as Chola architecture. That's what I just tweeted. So getting into the topic, the first question comes whenever I teach history. Why should we know history? That's the question I always put it to myself whenever I do some research on history, because people, like, when we ask students about history, they feel the class is very boring, because history is about we talk about the past, and what is there in the past. We are in the digital world, we are in the futuristic world, a lot of things are in digital technologies are happening, and why this history is again very important. But I feel the history is very, very important, because it is where all the technology has started. Without an history, even without knowing history, we can't move forward. So history is part of the life. Everybody's part of everybody's life. So whatever we do, whatever we research, history will be part of it. So what is history? Where can I find it? Then I had another question. What is an history? Where can I find it? Even see, whenever we need some information, we just go Google it, get the information, and read it. But knowing about history, even sometimes Google itself doesn't know the history. So we need to understand history in a different way. So what are the different methods? One is we need to go to libraries, or we need to go find some historical data which is written long years ago. We need to understand, try to read it, understand. Then the second tool I used was the books. The third thing is about understanding various periods, and fourth is knowing from the people. So this is why I put this tree here. Is it is where we start. We just put a seed. When then the tree comes up. Like it's something like that. When you start any research or anything, the seed is very important. If the seed is being properly laid, and I think so, we'll be flourished with our data, whatever we have got. So getting without delay, I'm getting into my topic. It's about on Chola architecture. So Chola architecture is one of the predominant architecture style which been followed in India, or also in Tamil Nadu. It was very popular. So Chola architecture was between 900 to 1150 AD. The capital of the Chola dynasty was the city of Tanjavur, which is from 1836 to 1267 AD. So the great temple of Tanjavur was found by the Rajaraja Chola I. The Tanjavur, it's also the temple is also called as Bragadishwara temple. We also call it as the Great Temple of Tanjavur, which is the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And the Chola ruled also the Deccan, and they have many other kingdoms such as Pallavas, Pandyas, and other things they have gone across. They are advanced as far as Bengal. They went to Sri Lanka, Java, Sumatra, and had links far as Indonesia. So it has a wide, it doesn't stop with Tamil Nadu alone or India alone. They had a ruling which gone across various destinies. So their military and economic power was reflected in a grand architectural productions. So there are certain examples like Tanjavur, Gangaikanda Cholapuram, Dharasuram. So these are some of the examples of the heritage structures. So there are several places in present like Indonesia, Malay Peninsula were invaded by Rajaraja I of the Chola dynasty. The Chola invention featured expansion of Tamil Merchants Association, and they have gone across various parts of the country. So these are some of the trade routes they had, and also the Chola Empire, the Chola influence. These are the places had these influence, and they were being strong in Tanjavur because the headquarters was in Tanjavur, and they also gone across Kanchipuram, Vengai, and Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and various parts of the Tamil Nadu. So what are the special features? So why we talk about this Chola temples, even though we had various other rulers were there in India, in Tamil Nadu, why we are particular about this Chola is, so there are special features, or typical features in Chola dynasty. The temples are modest proportions, built entirely of stone, and they have a Dravidian style in the formative stages, use of well-dressed granites. Then they have a Pallavan influence absorbed in the Vimanas, similar to the Rathas. Then treatments like simplification of the exterior compared to the Pallavas with elimination of details, absence of lion motifs, capital modified by addition of neck moldings. So these are some of the typical features where the early temples of the Chola architecture had. The three Chola temples of southern India represent an outstanding creative achievement is the architectural conception of pure form of Dravidian type of temples. The Brihadishwara at the Tanjavur became the first great example of the Chola examples, followed by the development which other two properties also bear the witness. The great Chola temple also has exceptional and most outstanding testimony development of the architecture of the Chola Empire and the Tamil civilization in the southern India. The great Chola temple at Tanjavur, at Gangaikonda Cholapuram, Dharasuram are the outstanding example of the architecture and the representation of the Chola ideology. So this is a typical section of the Chola temple. So if you look at the Chola temple, it has a center, the Garbhagriha, the Mandapas, and all the things. And if you look at the Gopuram, it has a hollow structure. I'll be showing in the other example. So the Chola temples are also characterized by the circular and square section, beautified inner side of external walls, special vimanas on upper side of the sanctum, dome-shaped shikara, kalasa on the top of gopurams, integrates sculptures, inscriptions on the wall of these temples, pillared mandapas. So there are many mandapas. We have Mahamandapa, Nandi Mandapa, etc. This is a typical detail on the Chola gopurams. So if you look at this vertical face, the wall is divided into two stories. You can able to see there the wall is divided into two stories by a means of an overhanging cornice, which is only the horizontal member. Contains pillars, pilasters and niches with sculptures. In the middle of each recess is a figure subject, and the sculpture seen here it stands God as the gate. The entire periphery of the temple base consists of mythical animals and lions. So these are the typical characteristic architectural design of Chola temples carved in temple walls. These are the stone structures which are carved in the temple walls. And these are the decorative niches of the Chola temples which depicts are sculpted. Then pilasters, these magnificent architectural design are carved as projections in walls with placing depicts within. The pilasters positioned in both sides of the main Devakutas. And we have the kudus. These are the two lion heads with crowns, the covered roof of the pilasters. So these are some of the typical detailing which we found in the Chola architecture. And getting into then moving towards the Gangaikonda Cholapuram. So this is a view of the temple. And Gangaikonda Cholapuram is the architecture of this temple. Booths of 9-story vimanas that exist to a height of 185 feet facing the east direction. Gangaikonda Cholapuram exposed huge sculptures and carvings not less than 54.86 meter in height. The temple structure follows the style of the Bragadishwara temple. It has a typical, and you can see there is a huge balance, axis, symmetry. So whatever we undergo in our theoretical aspects of architecture, we see in this particular temple complex. And as I was talking about, this is the study which there is a plan in the Gopuram where many have been not allowed to go into the Gopuram area. So I had an opportunity to go get a permission to go there, where there is a plan has been drawn there in the second level of the Gopuram, where the north point is being marked there. So when I just kept for example, I just kept my phone there to understand, like, in those periods, how they have accurately marked the direction. So that is what there, and the plan has been just been carved on the floors. And again, this is the grand entrance there. This is what I was talking about, the hollow shape, the dome. The dome is an hollow shape. This is the area where the Garbhagriha is there. So I have taken a shot on the towards the roof. So you have seen there, it is like a huge hollow space there. And coming back to, like, people always, when you talk about Chola, people always talk about Tanjavur, the great big temple, and people also talk about Gangaikonda Cholapuram. And Chola doesn't stop with Tanjavur, or they didn't stop with Gangaikonda Cholapuram. They moved towards various places. So this is the Rajagopuram at the temple near Kumbakonam by the same Rajaraja Chola one. At the area of like 1014 to 1044, this temple was also expanded later by Vikrama Chola, the consistent ruler of the Chola dynasty. Here also, if you look at, you will see the typical stone structure with the same the details which have been presented in my previous slides. There are certain elements that have been presented. If you look at the elements, it will be like similar, the same, the balance, symmetry, everything is being maintained in this particular temple complex. This is about the other temple. Again, the Chola rule in this is in Purnanama period in 1173. This is a temple in Sri Lanka for more than 5 decades. Following the Chola period, 157 years Buddhist rule existed there. After the Buddhist rule, 2 decades of Kalinga and Maha period existed. But here, if you look at this temple, it has a typical Chola influence in compared to the form, compared to the style, and compared to the materials and all the elements present there. But again, the roof forms in the Gopuram, again in the right side images, if you see the roof form, it has a typical Buddhist influence, because though the temple is a Chola period temple, but it also has the influence of Buddhist in this temple. This is another temple, Ranganatha temple here in Vellore, because even the Chola have also crossed Vellore. They went near to the Kanchipuram region also. Here also, if you look at the temple, is very small, and that you can see the typical detail stone with 2 stories, gopurams, and the details of each and every element. Again, you can see some of the area where the gopuram is not the hollow one here. Here, the gopuram style is different. It's like as a typical of Buddhist influence into that. Then coming into the Kulothunga Cholan, it is again the Chola dynasty. There's a Shiva temple in Tellur near Vellore. This is a very old temple. If you look at this temple, it has two things. One is it has a stone, also it has a brick construction. Where because the predominant material here will be the stone, and also the gopurams are only constructed through bricks. This also has a typical. It's a very ruined structure, and we are like trying to get back this temple. We are working on towards this temple to get back to its original state. And you also see the Shivalinga on the pillars. These are some of the inscriptions found. With these inscriptions, we come to know that this is a Chola temple. Because there is no evidence this temple is a Chola temple, because there are some inscriptions on the stones. From that, we able to understand this is a Chola structure. Again, also the detailing of typical Chola structure, the pillars, the detailing on the pillars, the detailing on the walls. Again, this is the entrance, the Garbhagriha, and this also has a mandapam and the Garbhagriha area. There's another temple in Vellore, again, which has a Chola influence, is the Veppambatu Shivan temple at Veppambatu near like Cholavaram. Cholavaram is the place in Vellore where the Cholas have had a settlement there. So it is like though they are had an headquarters in Tanjavur, even in Vellore they had a place on Cholavaram where they Chola had an influence there. This temple is now it has been like people. There are a lot of inscriptions of this temple are lying backside of this the green space. So I had an opportunity to go there, find some structures, because these people, the village people there, they didn't understand this is an historical old temple which has a Chola influence. So what they have done is they have adapted modern temple concept into that. So if you look at this temple in the front facade, the elements, the pillars, the elements have the Chola influence. But if you look at the gopurams and the other parts, it has a modern temple thing. Again, this is the typical the Chola pattern here, and also these small. If you see some of the inscriptions, some of the sculptures here, which depicts the story of this temple. So there are some stones lying at the back of that. I have also collected. I have seen the stones, and we have seen some inscriptions written there, which depicts the story that all these sculptures will like this performs the action of the stories. These are some of the inscriptions written there. Typical detail of an Chola structure. Again, this is also a detail. And coming to the other thing, this is not a temple thing. It is the area where near Cholavaram, where people were making coins. The Chola kingdom was making coins for their trade purpose. So here, if you look at this is where the moldings were happen, and this is the canal where the moldings were being sent. They get heated up. The copper they send, they heated up the copper. They send it to this through this channel where they create coins, various coins for the trade purpose. This was the channel. So these are some of the structures which I can present here when the time is given to me. So I'll stop here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you. Over to you, Isik.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dinesh, for the interesting training session on Chola architecture. Once again, to the audience, if you have any questions to the guest speakers, please type in your question in the chat box section at the bottom right corner of the Webex window, and I will read your question later during the Q&A session. And also to the audience, please take note that I will post attendance form at the end of the sharing session as well. Now let's move on to our second speaker, architect Tushara K from Avani Institute of Design, AVID, which is based in Kerala, India, with a sharing on reinterpreting the cultural landscape of Kerala and academic approach. So please welcome architect Tushara, and the room is yours. So which one is actually architect Tushara? Oh, the one in white. Okay. Okay, architect Tushara, the room is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sik. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tushara. I'm representing Avani Institute of Design, a design school located in North Kerala, India. So to give a brief intro, I'm an architect and urban designer, graduated from College of Engineering, Trivandrum, Kerala, and later did my master's in urban design from University School of Design. And I started my career, teaching career there itself, and then moved on to teach in an offshore campus of Birla Institute of Technology in Ras Al Khaimah, and later came back and joined Avani Institute of Design in 2017. So my larger academic and research interests revolve around responsive architectural practice through inquiries on urban reinvention, indigenous urbanism, and politics of spaces. So with that brief intro, let me share my screen. Hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm here to present an ongoing academic research that actually deals with the developing pedagogical tools which investigate and reinterpret the cultural transformation in the city context in the case of Kerala, India. So before beginning, these are reflections gathered from an extended journey that I started during my post-graduation period on relooking the cultural landscape, which has been developed through third year semester 5 studios in Avani in 2020, and later collaborated with my colleague architect Meenakshi Dubey and team later in 2021 and the colleagues. So before moving on with the research, let's look at the idea of the cultural landscape. What is the idea of cultural landscape? I would like to invite your attention to a few of the glimpses that I showcase here. These are some of the urban landscapes in India, historic urban landscapes in India that evolved over time. These are pictures of Varanasi, Sarnath, which is a Buddhist site, and Hampi, the capital city of Vijayanagar dynasty in southern Kerala, and Ajmer in India. So what is the idea of cultural landscape? Cultural landscapes are that have been affected, influenced, and shaped by human environment. It is defined as a geographical area, including both cultural and natural resources, and the wildlife and the domestic animals therein, associated with a historic event, activity, or person, or exhibiting the cultural or aesthetic values. So, in fact, the cultural landscapes give us a sense of place. They are part of our regional heritage and part of our lives. They reveal over time the relationship with land, with over time the aspects of our original development through their forms, features, and history of use. So, moving on with the research, the idea was, can we read or decipher these cultural landscapes, particularly in the context of Kerala, India, for designing in and for the cities? So before moving on, let me get your attention to the geographical location of Kerala, which is the southernmost state in India. The geography of Kerala is such that it is bound by Arabian Sea on the west and the Western Ghats on the east, with highland, midland, and lowland. Kerala, which lies in the historic tropic region, is mostly subjected to the type of humid tropical wet climate with monsoon rains for more than 6 months. This natural peculiarity has influenced the emergence of the trade cities in Kerala and the cultural transformation. So these are some of the images of historic urban landscape city cores in Kerala. Starting from left is the city core of Trivandrum, which is the capital city of Kerala, then city core of Cochin and city core of Calicut. So these urban landscapes, on close inspection, we will understand that this cultural region of Kerala, positioned on India's southwestern tip, upholds a testimony of its historic growth trajectory and subsequent cultural processes. Here I am presenting few highlights on the case of an academic approach on deciphering the cultural associations and built fabric of the city of Calicut, also known as Kozhikode. Moving on, so this rationale of this research came from two unsettling experiences that most of us face as academicians, pedagogues, and also as urban practitioners, that engage constantly with the built environment, both contemporary and of the past. The first one being the hegemonic and colonized narratives of the historic cities and precincts, some of which even overlook the holistic relationship of people, place, and land life. The second being the holistic conversation in BR design education, where heritage becomes a niche conversation and mostly reduced to the idea of conservation, protection, and documentation projects. So this is a slide which shows the case of Kozhikode, an artistical rendition seen by Portuguese. As Raymond Williams argued, landscapes were material productions within which were coded particular ideologies. The academic approach sets out to look at the future trajectories of buildings in the city of Calicut, while critically looking at the emergence and transformation of the city and the vernacular. The methodology largely focuses on translational tools as part of the design pedagogy that does not mimic, however, responds to the existing built vocabulary and the settings. The same methodology has been tested by Professor Roger Connor, a former professor in Carleton University and then mentor at Avani. We collaborated with him with the design school in Canada with the same site and methodology and the city of Kozhikode. And let's closely look at the historic urban landscape of Calicut. These are the two maps which shows the transoceanic spice trade route establishing Kozhikode or Calicut as a prosperous port. From the 14th century onwards, Calicut was a most important port in the region. By the time of Vasco da Gama's arrival, the regional rulers were on course towards achieving a hegemony over all the rival pepper ports on the coast. Over the following century, Calicut became the focal point of resistance against the Portuguese and a fulcrum of Muslim, commercial, political, military, and religious activity. Despite this key role that Calicut played not only in South India, but wider in the Indian Ocean history. So at present, Calicut presents a palimpsest landscape positioned on India's Malabar coast, which has been crafted by maritime trade, Arabian Sea, facilitated by the monsoon winds with multi-ethnic cultural groups and interlaced spice networks. What we are seeing in the screen is a commercial trade and city core of Kozhikode with its critical modern and critical vernacular layout. The historical geography of Kozhikode has a distinct physical and cultural association with the people and the livelihood, which is represented in the cosmopolitan culture, material expressions of hybridity, indigenous building processes, culinary culture, etc. So the idea was, can we document these distinct physical and cultural manifestations? Can it be a translation of relationship between land life, people, and place, which is mediating in the city's history and present? And how can it help in evolving architectural gestures, mediating continuity of the city's transformation? So here the discussion is about building gestures or architecture in the city in the cultural landscape. So it's an academic approach, sets out to document these cultural manifestations, which offer a key marker towards responsible and responsive approach to the future urban built development. These are methodologies, examines the responsiveness of our design interventions through design methodologies in the historic city core to the heritage, city form, and publicness. And these are few of the glimpses to orient you with the landscape of Calicut. So this is Calicut Beach Road along with the critical vernacular layer and the critical modern layer. And we can still see certain presence of extra-regional and trans-local communities, including Gujarati Jains, Bora communities, Arab Muslims, and their historical and cultural affinities and exchanges between these trading communities, along with native Hindu communities, re-emphasizing the multiculturalism that is evident in the social fabric. This shows an urban place which is shaped over centuries, express a record of ongoing cross-cultural interactions between the place and people, yielding both tangible and intangible expression of the built fabric with its character zones, market streets, related warehouses, and social institutions. These are some of the images of the community spaces which shares a common space. So this is, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is an ongoing academic research as part of an undergraduate studio in Avani Institute of Design. It's a two-part academic research where part one looking at the emergence of cultural landscape by attempting to comprehend the hybridity of the place through spice as an agent of transformation. Part 2 examines the transformation of the cultural landscape through the lens of critical vernacular, through closely mapping the aspects of land life, people, and place to discover architectural identity interlaced in the city's cultural landscape. So the argument here is proposed that spatially appropriate inferences in designing in and for cities, addressing the contemporary and future challenges through proposing responsive environments which generate sustainable languages. The methodology was actually a derivation from historic urban landscape approach, which was developed as an alternative or responsive pedagogy, also because the first studio ran in the amidst the COVID-19 outbreak, which ran in a very remote online platform. So the exploration goes like this. The reinterpreting the emergence of the cultural landscape of Kozhikode, where spice as an agent to decode the material and cultural expressions were explored in through 6 thematic inquiries. To understand spice and trade, what is the influence in Calicut city's history, emergence, cosmopolitan culture, and everydayness? The exploration was largely based on the idea of understanding the context, conceptualizing, and bringing contents for a public project, which is actually an interpretation center in this case. So the methodology largely revolved around archival research as a means of deep documentation and refamiliarizing with the city. The critical methodology looked at the old trade and commerce core of the city of Kozhikode, which was documented and analyzed in untangling the hybridity of the urban form and space. This approach started from archival readings and debates, investigating on how the place has emerged and started getting evolved through the lens of spice and trade, further analyzing the historic landscape. The studio was planned to be in a completely remote platform due to the COVID outbreak. And the major, the exploration chart was 3 stages: mapping, translation, and a responsive project. In mapping stage, students critically looked at the emergence of the cultural landscape by attempting to comprehend the hybridity of the place through spice as an agent of transformation. In the translation stage, they tried to define the current context and document analyzing new tools such as diagramming, mapping, and metric studies to understand the changing landscape of the built and urban environment. And in the third case, it's a responsive project, which is a response to the historical and physical context and the community. I'll move on with certain student work samples where in the first idea, they try to do a cognitive mapping to understand their familiarity with the context with key markers in the context, which often reveal the historic aspects and the evolution of the city in their own perspectives. And in the second one was archival research and mapping, where spice as an agent of transformation was inquired through seminal readings on India and Indian Ocean by Ashindas Gupta and M.N. Pearson, through the discussions on trade and faith on medieval Malabar cause, as mentioned in Monsoon Islam by Sebastian Pranch, along with regional portrayals in the Impressionist Survey of History of City and related events in the historian M.G.S. Narayan's perspective. The evolution and transformation of the cultural topography was readdressed through the cartographic exercises by recording the observations, unraveling the historic as well as impressionistic narratives published in the journals. The archival research as a means of deep documentation and distinct translational tools for synthesis were found useful methods where the access to the city was either limited or nil due to the shifted pedagogical topographies of remote distance studio process. These are some of the mapping done by students based on these. Moving on with the translational tools, what we see here are certain translational tools which we proposed as an alternative design pedagogy that we developed in collaboration with Professor Roger Corner. We collaborated in the studio where we distilled a diagrammatic translational thinking tool methodology, within which is a 1/16 matrix connecting the idea of the city to the idea of interpretation and the public project. So the second figure shows a composite drawing addressing city and the ideas of metrics in a more relational manner. And the third drawing represents a hybrid diagram representing the first shaping idea of their emerging project. So these are some student work samples where they try to understand, starting from city scale up until the sites, various levels of translations distilled to specific areas in architectural hybrid drawing. It's a spiral method, one informing the other. It was done through a non-linear methodology, both combining an analog and digital manner. These are some sample student works. Moving on with the third stage, which is a derivation of a responsive project, students took forward the reflections gathered in designing an interpretation center in the two, we have given two sites of historical confluence for this. So this is about the first studio. Moving on, and this is in fact the response that we obtained as a responsive project after the end of the first studio. Moving on with the second studio, which is an extended research, academic research on a responsive environment for Kozhikode, which is through re-looking at the critical vernacular. The focus inquiries were on, in the context of cultural landscapes moving towards homogeneity, what could be the response to this historic plurality when we approach architectural design? How can we resituate ideas, aesthetics, and practices of the past in the contemporary city? What could be the responsiveness to the heritage, city form, and publicness? In the slide that we are seeing, the critical vernacular architecture along the beach road of Calicut, where you can see the fine grains, which is superimposed by the new developments. Two of the most important aspects of the methodology are narrative design tool and interpretation. So this study uses narrative analysis of the techniques to explain how the vernacular can be used as one of the significant design approach at this point. Adapting to the primary investigation and design methodology, we expand the previous architecture and the city studio, which was inquiring on emergence of the cultural landscape. This studio on responsive environment penetrates into the deeper layers of the architectural identity and diversity of the built environment of city of Kozhikode, thus attempting to address the following: that how can contemporary architecture respond to the history through built form, fabric, and memory. Studio explored key aspects of critical vernacular in this context through understanding cultural landscape of Kozhikode, which represent the combined works of nature and man, and the physical and cultural transformation of the city through cartographic mapping and site documentation, and understanding the architectural identity of the city through the language which is true to the place and people. The further methodology was similar to the methodology we adopted in Studio 1, starting with a mapping, then translation, and a responsive project. The mapping was actually here mentioned as questioning the notion of responsive architecture or environment in the city of Kozhikode through the lens of critical vernacular. Translation meant to define the current context and document, analyze using diagramming, mapping, and relational metric studies. The responsive project, again, we haven't given a programmatic typology in the beginning. We have asked the students to develop an open program, which can be a greenfield or brownfield or an adaptive retrofit project, which would be ideal for a historic urban landscape in the context, which can be triangulating history, critical vernacular, etc. So these are some of the glimpses from the deep documentation they have done around the same area with the next set of batch. And these are some deep documentation that they have done on the critical vernacular and the critical modern, understanding the identity of the place. And the translational tools, here we started with a more of a relational narrative detail where students can understand the essence of the space, which was then translated into a design matrix, which was represented in a more relational format with each other. This also began as kind of a pre-film, as an exploration method for their idea of the city, because this is also ran in a very hybrid mode, starting in an online platform, then slowly moved into a actual studio platform. So these are some examples from the student works on relational narrative detail, where they try to understand critical vernacular in the historic urban landscape of Calicut, different parts of Calicut. These are some relational metrics developed by them, understanding what does the city and context mean to them, with ending with responsive architecture and environment in the 16th metrics. So we have collaborated through workshop with Professor Roger Corner in developing it into a pre-film and a concept for the program. So later, moving on with the responsive project, students started with creating a vision diagram for the project and a responsive open program, which can be a completely greenfield project or brownfield project or a critical landscape project. So the responsiveness here meant responsiveness to the critical history of the city, climate, technology, material and construction, current challenges of migration, inequities, and socio-cultural publicness. So these are some of the images of student vision diagram where they have developed into a programmatic approach and the relative narrative detail. And these are the relational metrics and few of the outcomes which responded to the critical vernacular when designing a new project for the city. So before concluding, I would like to reflect on few of the aspects that we understood through the research. In the context of contemporary city moving towards homogeneity, not responding to the historic plurality and cultural expressions, which is unique in determining the sense of the place of the city, spaces results in generic urban spaces with characterless streets, enhancing the crisis of identity and contextuality. This methodological alternative that we propose strongly proposes responsible and responsive approach as emerging concept mediating continuity in contemporary urban developments and cultural landscape. The methodology argues for an evaluation of regional practices, revisiting the critical vernacular and specificity in terms of materials, spatial practices to innovate critical vernacular solutions for the future. And we propose this as a fundamental approach without being nostalgic about the past and the requisite in contemporary and future development proposals. And what could be the way forward from here? This analytical model can help in critically deciphering any cultural landscape of our choice. This is a spiral method of revisiting the design decisions, arguments, connecting the dots and reinforcing the logical inferences, following which unique individual expressions or versions of the projects can be emerged. This is a responsive dynamic pedagogy responding to the global scenarios of changing landscapes of academic practice. And in fact, the academic research goes on at Avani, where in Studio 2022, we have explored the cultural context of Trivandrum, the capital city of Kerala, and at the institutional level, in collaboration with Avani Heritage Cell and Avani Malabar Studio, we are planning to continue this documentation process, also in align with the larger institutional vision of making it as a regional repository of Malabar region in Kerala. To add on, as we are representing few countries here who share a similar historical background through water and trade, hopefully looking forward to ways of future collaborations in looking at our historic urban landscape. Once again, thank you UTM School of Architecture for providing this opportunity. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Architect Tishara. A very interesting responsive study model in the approach of history, heritage, and urban. I think we shall talk later about this. I think I'm very interested to learn about the pedagogical method. Looks very, very interesting. So now I think without wasting any more of our time, I would like to welcome our third speaker, Dr. Technologist Adi Abida from Universitas Negeri Makassar, Indonesia, and she will be sharing on the history and legacy of old city architectural and culture heritage case study on Makassar, Indonesia. So please welcome Dr. Andi Abida, and the room is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Izzy.
Yep.
I will be start.
Okay.
Okay, my presentation is, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I am Andi Abida from Indonesia. My background study about theory and history, architecture, architectural culture. And heritage architecture and old city in old city. This is my presentation about the history and legacy. All cities, architecture and culture heritage, case study Makassar, Indonesia. This research about my master study about the urban design. My master study is urban design. Thank you. I will be start. Cannot move. Okay. This is Indonesian islands. You can look Indonesian island. So many islands, small and big islands. The location of Makassar in South Sulawesi. This is red color. This is South Sulawesi. Makassar is a capital city in South Sulawesi. We can start the history of Makassar. Before the arrival European, Makassar was important trading hub Southeast Asia with link to China, India, and Middle East. The city was center trade spices including cloves and nutmeg, which highest value in Europe. In this, the Bugis people is Bugis and Makassar people have the skilled saver and traders. During 17 and in 18th century, Makassar was ruled by Goa, Kingdom of Goa, the one most kingdom have a power in Sulawesi. The Sultan of Goa control all of trade in the region in East Indonesia. One most prominent example of Makassar architectural heritage for Rotterdam, a history that for built in the 17th century. The fort is important symbol of the city's colonial past and has been well preserved, with many its original structure still standing today. Visitor can explore the fort and learn about the history through guide tours and exhibition. In the pre-colonial time, the architecture of Makassar was characterized by use traditional building, like the traditional in Southeast Asia. What is that? Still the using wood, bamboo, and thatch, like the steel of horse. Horse were built steel of horse, steeply pitched roof, designed with as region heavy rainfall and tropical climate. The most significant architectural structure of pre-colonial Makassar, the place of local rule the Raja. The Raja is like king. In the local language, Raja is kingdom. The palace known Bala Lompoa. Bala Lompoa is big house. This is the home, the kingdom of Goa. The region of important pre-colonial Makassar culture with blend animism, Hindu, Buddhism influence, and Islam tradition. Makassar pre-colonialism, architecture, and culture tradition were characterized by rich and diverse mixed influence from across region and beyond, and remain important part of the city's culture and heritage today. This is I will show. This is for Rotterdam. For Rotterdam is starting point for development of the colonial city in Makassar. For Rotterdam, built by Kingdom of Goa in 1545 by Kingdom of Ten of Goa, and then in 1995 until 16 65 until 1669, the Kingdom of Goa have war between the Kingdom of Goa and colonial and Dutch colonial. After that, the 1669, the for Ujung Pandang before for Rotterdam before the name Fort Ujung Pandang. Fort Ujung Pandang fell in the Dutch hand, and then the Governor General Spelman make rebuilding in the fort, and then applying European architecture style, and the rename for Rotterdam when the hometowns in Governor Spelman. This is the painting by Roman de Hogus about the war between Kingdom of Goa and VOC. This the shore is KTLV Leiden. Now, this is the map of for Rotterdam, 1965. This is for the fort in when the kingdom of Goa, the building inside of the fort is traditional house like traditional house of Sulawesi, and this we can look after the 1773, the Rotterdam have renovated when the two additional bastion in the front and the behind of the Rotterdam. This is the Rotterdam oriented to the sea. After that, rebuilding renamed Ujung Pandang for Rotterdam in 1669, it became the center of Dutch colonial administration, military, trade, and port activity in Makassar. The fort was strongly located in west coast of Sulawesi, overlooked in the harbor of Makassar, which made it ideal location for Dutch establish their presence and control over the region. The fort was with Dutch colonial power in Makassar, and all government military activities were centered around the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, used the fort and trading post and center for the collection and distribution of spices, textile, and other community. We can look the building in the Fort Rotterdam. This is the building inside after the Dutch colonial built the architecture, the European Europe architecture. This is a landmark of the area. This is the church. We can look in the side. This is the landmark of the area, and then the landscape. The architectural landscape in the complex. And then we can look the area of the Fort Rotterdam inside. This is the church. At the time the function to the white people to going to the praying, and then the fort of playing significant role development and for Makassar, which became important center of trade, commerce, and region. The Dutch introduced a modern port facilities and infrastructure, which facilitate flow of goods and people between Makassar and other parts of archipelago in the world. The development of the colonial city in Makassar under Dutch colonial rule was marked by expansion of government facility beyond the walls of Fort Rotterdam and creation of a new urban landscape. Initially, most government and military activity were centered inside the Fort Rotterdam. However, the Dutch present influence grow in Makassar. They began expand their administrative and commercial activity beyond in the fort walls, extending eastward toward the Karebosi Square, as Koningsplein in Dutch language. The area is in the fort, now Karebosi Square and Koningsplein become the new center and colonial government and urban development in Makassar. The Dutch built a new government complex and the other public building around the square, including resident governor, post office, court office, church, society de harmony, and the other. We can look, this is the map. This is before, this is for Rotterdam, and then the Dutch colonial going to outside to build a facility of the city, like the office, governor office location in here, I think. Yeah, in here. And then the society, the harmony location in here. Church location in here. This is Karebosi Square. This is Karebosi Square. And then also the government. The Dutch government has built the new settlement in outside the area fort. We can look. This is the map in the early 1916. So many building, so many the city is grown now. So many development building different in the other map. This is the Harmony Society built 1869, and then post office 1925. This is the court office 1915. And this is the museum. Museum Ujung Pandang today, but before this is the governor, the resident governor. This is Bill 1916. And then this is, but today this is mayor office. But before this house is governor office. That's. This is Bill 1906, and this is Church Emmanuel, Bill 1884. Settlement north of Fort Rotterdam. Before I already explained, because after the colonial go to outside to grow to develop the city, the facility of office facility of office go to the east Fort Rotterdam, and the settlement going to north Fort Rotterdam. During the Dutch colonial period in Makassar, there were several settlements in North and Fort Rotterdam that inhabited by people different ethnic. These settlements were typically segregated based on ethnic and social status. One of the large settlements in the North Fort Rotterdam was Kampung Arab, Arab village, which inhabited by Arab trader and their family and Arab community in Makassar, and also in a long history dating back the pre-colonial period, and has established close the local Bugis and Makassar community. Another notable settlement was Kampung Cina, China's village, which was inhabited by Chinese trader and their family. The Chinese community Makassar has significant presence in the city's economy, particularly in trade, textile and sorry. Textile and other goods. We can look in this. This is the settlement of the area. This is the location in the Dutch people. This is location Dutch people community. This is the India and Arab people location in. I think this here this location. And this is location Kampung Melayu. This is Malay people from the Sumatra. And then so many ethnics here. The China's located in China's here. And then we can look the map in the location. This is the settlement or city built by colonial. This is we can look the grid system like in Europe. The system settlement in Europe. The city is applying the grid. This is Malay mosque. This is built 60, and this Arabic people mosque. This is built 1907. This is the location, the traditional marking in the location, this location, and the mark, traditional mark built after in since colonial era. This is the China, the clan, I don't know, Klenteng or the maybe clan. Yeah, I think this is Klenteng. And then the location, the Arabic mosque in here, but we can look but in this time all the location is to be Chinatown, because many many people China people build the home in the area of Dutch people, in the Malay people, and also the Arabic, and all from the Buton and others. This is we can look the one of the bill shop house in the bill the colonial era. We can look this here, and the corridor of the area, one of corridor like here. We can look, and the traditional window still like the era before Indonesia independent. This is we can show the type of the window. There were smaller settlement and Makassar people, the area who were indigenous people in South Sulawesi. The settlement were typically located further from Dutch colonial center and were less integrated into the colonial economy. The north of Fort Rotterdam was the first cosmopolitan area with ethnic and cultural community living close proximity to each other, while there were tension between different ethnic groups. There were too many instant cooperation and culture exchange. The construction, the ethnic village in the north of Fort also suggests degree of cultural segregation, where the Dutch colonial government sought to separate the different ethnic group within the city. This was common practice during the colonial period, where European power often impose their culture and social norm on their colonial subject. Preservation and restoration approach, preservation and revitalization approach are important for maintaining the historical significance and cultural heritage of all city and structure. There are two main approaches that commonly used to achieve this culture significance and landscape culture. Culture significant approach focus to preservation and restoration of individual culture structure or building that have significant culture or history value. This approach emphasizes the importance of maintaining the original architectural style and design their structure while also ensure that they are function safe modern use. The main goal of this approach is to protect and celebrate the unique culture identity of the place while also promoting tourism and economic development. On the other hand, the landscape culture approach preserve overall culture landscape of the area, including natural and building environment. This approach consider the interconnection between building, open space, treescape, and the other elements that contribute to the overall character and identity of the place. This approach is particularly useful for preserving history district and or neighborhood where the culture heritage expands through the collective identity of the community and its built environment. I think that's all. Thank you, Dr. Izik.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Technologist Andi Abida, for the sharing session. Okay, now let's move on to our final speaker of the event, Dr. Technologist Leng Pao Chung from University Technology Malaysia, with the sharing on the impact of solar chimney for stack ventilation in the Malaysia terrace house. So please welcome Dr. Leng, and the room is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Izik, okay, for the moderation. Yeah, good day, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the opportunity given by our directors of architecture schools, okay, in UTM, for me to speak on my PhD topics in these international webinars. So basically, this sharing is about the natural ventilation, which is located one of the terrace house in Kuching, Sarawak. So without further ado, probably having a quick introduction first. Yeah, my name is Leng Pao Chung, or you can call me PC. So I am the senior lecturer in architecture schools of University Technology Malaysia. I start my journeys of architecture since 2006 as a Bachelor of Architecture student. Then I continue my PhD in UTM as well until from 2011 until 2016. And I start my career as a senior lecturer since 2017 until now. Okay, so without further ado, let me share my screen here. Okay. Okay, yeah. Here's the topic, the impacts of solar chimney for stack ventilations in the Malaysian terrace house. Okay, yeah, before I going into the analysis, probably I have a quick introductions about the study background. Okay, for the study background, basically, this is quite something that a lot of people are looking into, especially the few decades. Okay, we talk about sustainability. So for the background studies, why this topic? Why I wish to take up this topic, because we have seen that the importance as well as the vitalities of the energies. Okay, as well as the importance of applying the passive designs in our current building, especially in Malaysia. So we have known that like building industry has been regarded as a high energy consumption industry. One of the studies saying that it's almost near to out of the all the contributors of the energy is building contributes almost about 40 to 60% out of all the components that can release the carbon dioxide in this world. And most of the building, yeah, without HVAC, or heating, ventilation, air conditioning, regardless you are in the tropical countries or you are in the Western countries or temperate country, we need HVAC most of the time. And HVAC is actually the most simplest and easy to apply building services, okay, in our building, that we can straight away get the thermal comfort without having second thoughts, and it's quite affordable in most of the areas. Like for example, in Malaysia, with like around 1,000 plus, okay, you can get the 1 horsepower aircons and install in your room, and you have worry free about the ventilations already. Okay. And unintended environmental resources to utilize as a passive design strategies. Most of the passive design strategies that we have mentioned here probably is not really widely applied or promoted around, because we have shortcuts that we can use the air conditioning. That's why the tendency of applying and using the passive design here is seldom being mentioned, especially in the mass housing developments. And unresolved or outdated regulations and bylaw guidelines. Like for example, in Malaysia, we are started with Uniform Building Bylaw 1984, but currently we have another updated versions, which is 2022. Okay, somehow this would be a good steps for us to move on, because we can see that most of the time for the submissions and all the drawings that we get approved from the local authority, architects or developers, they're trying to fulfill just the minimum requirement without a second thoughts, because they just want to maximizing the profit making, okay, let's say, okay, and so forth, because they have other factors to consider on this case. And for sure, back to this global warming. So all of these will contribute to the global warming and urban heat island, which has caused a lot of the climate change issue that we face nowadays. That's why here comes the study topic. Okay. Yeah. So research focus wise, most of the people are going to, I'm not going to read through the graph, but I'm somehow just want to summarize up why the terrace house. Because as you can see from the graph here, in Malaysia, single story housing and 2 to 3 story housing is basically one of the trends since a few decades ago. Yeah, this is the trends of the mass housing in Malaysia that has been built out. And if we're talking about the green building wise, well, we were straight away think about the new building, want to apply the gadget, want to apply PV, and many more. Yeah, new buildings haven't born yet. That's why it's easy for us to do anything. We can do any plannings on it. But how about the existing building? As you can see, we have quite a numbers of the existing stocks and even the overhang, which means that unsold housings or the buildings around the world, around Malaysia itself. So when people talking about green building, most of the people straight for focus on that. But that's why the research focus here is like we have to think on, for existing building, how we can help them. Okay, how we can allow them to have chance to without using air conditioning, they still can go so-called like a passive design or greens and so forth. That's why instead of like focusing on the offices and so forth, housing would be the main and majorities of the building that we can find in Malaysia, especially after the urbanization throughout these few decades since our independence. Here, okay. So the problem statements here. Yeah, this is one of the photos of the single story house, okay, in Kuching, Sarawak, my hometown. Yeah, due to the overheating the indoor environment, okay, that would be caused by the high solar radiation and the high diurnal air temperature that has caused the concrete modern terrace house become warm and thermally uncomfortable here. Okay, because the unlike the traditional Malay traditional house or other traditional or vernacular buildings, which is really well considered about the ventilation or the passive designs and so forth. The mass housing, yeah, because mass, right, it has to be great and fast built it. So the materials wise as well as the designs wise is all have to get from the fastest way or easiest way. So concrete is one of the materials that we can easily get around from the markets wise, since there is a lot of development is using the concrete due to its strengths in terms of the properties of the structures. Hence, this, but even though it's easy, but it will cause a lot of heat gains as well as the urban heat island issue here. The overheating always becomes the issue, especially when you are in the urban area. You can really feel the heat. Like in Kuala Lumpur itself, even at night, you feel the heat inside your room. So that will be one of the issues. And thermal discomfort for sure. When you go back to your room after your walk, you feel hot. Then what we will do, even though you are opening up your window, you can't really feel any air at all. So the most straightforward and easy way is to just put on your aircon, right? You just click on that. After that, you get the fresh air as well as the cool air to cool you down. Everyone is doing that. Since morning time, you are doing it in office. Night time, you are doing it at your room. Means that we get a lot of the CO2 carbon footprint from time to time. So the poor air, indoor air circulations and ventilation, this is what also caused by the fan coils units of the aircon, because we get the air keep circulating in the building, so it will cause the sick building syndrome as well. Hence, the natural ventilation is very important. Okay, for this case, you can see for the after we have studied the different sectors according to the principle, for example, the aperture cooling through the window, and by using the eventual effects, okay, the principles that have caused the pressure gradients and wind or buoyancy induced ventilation, as well as the solar induced ventilation. Here comes my topic. So these are going to be the sum of why the topic of the one that I presented today is going to be proposed. Okay, in terms of the methods wise, most of the people, yeah, we will either in long time ago, we prefer to go for the scale experimental model or the full scale experimental model. And due to developments of the advancement of the technology, slowly we goes into the analytical studies, mathematical formulas, empiricals, and so forth. Okay, but somehow there are some incompleteness, I can say so, when if we are just using one of it. Like let's say if you are using the full scale experimental model, probably you have the limitation, because you need to, in terms for you to study about the ventilation, you need to have uh, money, you need to have a lot of cost to build a real one-to-one scale, okay, which is not really practical. So other than that, mathematical formula, they have some limitations on that as well. And building simulation, CFD, is one of the latest technologies that has been widely applied in these natural ventilation studies. But in order to verify back, that's why in this my study, I'm trying to combining both. At first, will be we were trying to validate or verify the issue through the first full-scale experiment model first, followed by the modification, which will be done and conducted in the CFD simulations here. Okay, so in the first case, in order to verify that is the issues of the heating of on the solar or the in the terrace housing, because most of the time we are talking about that, we can find a lot of literature review, but we are unsure whether it is valid or not. Hence, a 6 months field measurement has been conducted in one of the selected building, a one-story terrace house, okay, in Kuching, Sarawak here. So in this case, we have selected the room, okay, bedroom, okay, which have been circles in the red colors circles that have attached with the air well, and we can observe whether air well, because air well is to provide the ventilations and daylighting for the intermediate room. So according to UBBL, the section 39, okay, we can knowing that at least around 10% of the floor areas should, I mean, in terms of the windows, operable windows, we should have 10% of in from the overalls of your floor areas. So for contractors wise or developer wise, usually they will just give you 10% in order to pass their submissions. Okay, So hence we're trying to look into that and see how effective the air well is in order to induce the natural ventilation. So these are the few measurements. We start with few measurements. After that, we're doing the validations of the software. And the last one, we're trying to predict the modification or the modified air well into the solar chimney in order to see with the performance of the ventilations in the second case. Okay, so these are the blows up of the rooms. Okay, the location will be in Kuching, Sarawak. It's a single-story terrace house. The main objective of this study is to investigate the performance of the adsorbent materials or inducing the air movement or the stack ventilation in the existing air well here. Okay, because by using this without any modification, we can see the performance, okay, of the existing layout, materials, okay, contacts of the building to see whether it works or not. Then the size of the existing air well is around 2 meters in depth, 1 meter in length, and 6 meter in height. And the size of the adjacent room is around 3 meter times 3 meter times 3 meter. It's a typical room as what we can usually see. And for the field measurement, you can see I have plotted A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, basically A, B, C is considered the 3 sensor points located in the room, and D, E, F is in the vertical sectionals, elevations that the sensor have been placed. So for bedroom, okay, we selected the bedroom 2 as a test room, okay, in order for us to measure and as a benchmarking room. Then for the rest of the room, we're still doing the measurement, but just putting the air temperature and relative humidity sensors in order to see and compare the result of it and monitors. Okay, so for outdoor wise, we need to have another outdoor weather station, even though we can't really get a huge or maybe a standard size with the weather stations, but somehow this could help us to compare the indoor and outdoor environment. Okay, for the findings wise, you can see the average existing test room thermal conditions. Okay, we have sorted out the results into 3 days, 3 types of the days, which is the hot days, consider the high temperature day, cold days, which is low temperature days, and normal days. And most of the, other than these 2 situations, we consider it as a normal days. And analysis have been done. So if we convert into predicted mean VOT, okay, for the thermal comfort wise and PPD, okay, we can see that most of the time, regardless of the hot day or so-called the low temperature or the cold days for the outdoor environment and even the normal days, it falls under the warm conditions, okay, which is not that suitable or comfortable if we following the ASHRAE 55. Okay, so that's why we have to do something after we have seen the results based on our field measurements here. Here comes the simulations. So now we know the issue from the first objective. Now we're going to see that, how are we going to improve further? Okay, in this case, okay. So in this case, we're trying to combining the louvers or the airwell ventilations through the single-sided ventilation. And because the rooms is actually having a single sides of the window, that's why we're having the limitations here. Hence, in order for us to induce more ventilation, we have to do another openings, which is through the stack ventilation. That comes the so-called cross ventilation, but it's through the temperature differences. In this case, we call it as a stack ventilation. Okay, I'm going to skip through because I have 5 minutes more. Methodology, as you can see here, the first phase will be using the louver gaps. Okay, the try out on the different gaps of the louvers and louvers angle. And can see after we have tested out, we can find that okay, these are basically the best the findings for the louvers gap show that 167 mm slack gaps was able to produce more consistent and constant speeds of the air compared to others. So even though the average airflow result for 125 mm were close to the 167, so the airspeed was reduced towards the ends of the room. Hence, at the ends, we are still prefer the 45 degrees together with the 167s. Okay. Then the second second step, after we have defined the so-called the optimized the louveuse window that can induce more air speeds into the indoor environment. So the second thing we want to have to do is to get the airwell height here. So we test on the different height first, and at the end you can see that the window, so the heights with 3.5 meter is actually can give you the optimized result here. Okay, so these are the results. So for the second step, after we have identified the heights of the solar chimney, then we can see, we can trying to test out on the original the length, okay, the airwell width gap, okay, or we call so-called length here. Okay, with that we have trying out, and at the end we have found out 1 meter, the existing 1 meter still can give you the so-called the optimized result here compared to others. Okay, then the others one, okay, will be the width, okay, of the airwell. After we have confirmed the height, okay, the width, the length gap, the width gap, as well as the louvers, you can find out the 2 meters wise will still giving you the best one. So we can see that for the optimizations of the airwell configuration, the stack height of 3.5, 1 meter width gap, and 2 meter length was obtained. So that can deliver the reasonable mean indoor air velocity of 0.34 meter per second with the mean air temperature of 30.7 degrees Celsius. So moreover, the 1 meter width gap configuration can produce 3.6 temperature gradient between the shaft, which is at the tops of the shading and the air wells, as well as the test room. Because for in this case, we need more of the temperature gradients in between the indoor environment and the tips of the solar chimney, which will give you more differences and pressure. Then after that, will follows by the the more significant air speeds or the air movement from the outdoor environment to the indoor environment. Okay, so in overall, these are how we're trying to identify the configurations of the airwell as well as the louvers that can give the better combination to induce more ventilations in the housing. So start with the louvers, followed by the airwell configuration, then this is what we get. Okay, in overall, these are the configurations that showing in this contextual. Okay, we can trying to see that for the 4 meter width room, okay, then with the heights of the window 1.5 meter and the airwell, the airwell height with 9 meters, we can get the 0.36 meter per second air movement in the normal days. Okay, so these are the summaries of the airwell that have been shown just now. Okay, so for the conclusions wise, we can see that the poor thermal performance of the existing building is actually one of the main concern, and this is why the ideas of having this study has been come out. And minor amendments, we allow small minor amendments from the existing building, especially for the domestic housing, in order for them to perform good ventilation instead of like replacing with the air conditioning. And green neighborhood character. So probably in the future, the solar chimney, if it can be accepted, can be promoted around, that could be one of the characteristics of the housing areas as well. And this could become also a good message for the policymakers, like especially for the mass housing, terrace house, who wish to go greens, like for the green housing wise. So policymaker could probably tap in this into their consideration when they make the policies or blueprints for the neighborhoods development in the future. Yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Izik.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Lang Pao Chung, for the sharing session on is it ventilation? Okay,
Yeah,
so now
thank you.
I'm opening the Q&A session for around 15 minutes, and we already have few questions at hand. We have at least 7 questions collected from the audience. So first question is actually directed to Prof. Dinesh. Is Prof. Dinesh around? Okay, Prof. Dinesh. Okay, Prof. Dinesh is still around, right? So the question is, to what extent did the Buddhists influence the design of Chola temple other than the adaptation of the dome? Adding to that, why is the decoration is minimal in the Buddhist influenced temple? Prof. Dinesh?
Yeah. See, there are, especially in the Chola temple, which I was discussing here, it is about the influence because there are various rulers who have been ruling the period here. So it has an influence in their building typologies. So when the Cholas left, when the Buddhists came there, so they have started using their elements, their forms in adapting to the existing Chola structures.
Okay, Prof. Dinesh?
Yeah.
Is that the answer?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it convinced or?
Okay. Okay. Prof. Dinesh, you only have one question so far. Okay.
Okay,
So
no issues.
okay. Actually, you have another question. Okay.
Yeah.
Prof. Dinesh. Okay. No. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So question number 2 is actually directed to Architect Tishara. Okay. Okay, when students are given tasks to do the mapping, do they have certain reference or parameters to refer to? And were these parameters given by the lecturers or students independently derive the parameters themselves? Were they properly guided by the lecturers by pedagogical model or framework?
Yeah, in fact, we have in the two studios, like in the initial stages, we used to give the critical inquiries that later becomes the mode of exploration. For example, in the first studio where we were trying to understand the cultural landscape, its emergence through the spice history, we gave two sets of inquiries, like 6 thematic inquiries, starting from understanding spice and its influence in the urban form, and the second set was to understand spice and trade in evolution of the built form. So these were two sets of inquiries to be in detail, like for example, what is the influence of spice and transoceanic history in the urban form, and how territories have been formed with respect to these kind of cultural transfusion, and what are the economical aspects, and in the built form aspects, what are the socio-cultural markers. For example, through the spice and trade, lot of foreigners came and settled in Kerala, like Dutch, Portuguese, Arabs, and Chinese. So there were cultural transfusion which is evident in the built fabric. So there were few questions that actually uh, inquires on the built form and the transformation that happened. That is the answer for the first question. And the second one, definitely, because since this is kind of a third year studio where we try to orient the students with through certain faculty lectures, we put together certain lectures. For example, like if it is a cultural landscape, we will give an orientation lecture about cultural landscape, and we will suggest the seminal readings. We'll always go for seminal readings in the context, and then leaving students the exploration. And then later on, for example, like certain precedent studies, in fact, we are actually talking about responsive architecture. So what can be the responsiveness, responsive justice, that and all we will give as key lectures in between the semester. That is the actual process.
Okay, thank you, Architect Tishara. Architect Tishara, you have 2 more questions. Okay, question number 2
Yeah.
for you. Okay, in teaching and learning process for the students to understand the culture and then implement it into a design, how long does it take for the students to produce the design studio scheme in a responsive public project?
Yeah. So basically here the studios under this University of Calicut, we get in fact 12 to 16 weeks for a studio inception to the kind of public, the project. So in third year, fifth semester, the pedagogy, like for example, the architecture and the idea of architecture and city was from the academic framework of our Institute of Design. So we try to explore in different ways. So in fact, the first stage of this process will be building a class archive. It's like a group project where we give thematic inquiries, where they will study through the archival research and mapping, cartographic and cognitive, and it will take around like 4 weeks. And then comes an individual interpretation of these collected data. That is what is translational tools. So they can come up with their own understanding about the essence of the space through like cross relating different information they have gathered, and that will also take another 4 weeks. And ideally programming and designing the responsive project will take 8 weeks. That's a whole kind of the module.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Architect Shara, for the answer. Okay, last question that I got from the audience. I wanted to know, since you study two different cities, did you have to adapt your pedagogical tools or strategies accordingly? And also, how was it when comparing the studio that you did and the one done by Architect Roger Connor in the same context?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when we started this, the idea of this pedagogical model, we started with few inquiries, like I was just mentioning. But depending, the two studios which ran in Kozhikode was an extended research on the same. And the third studio that we ran last semester in Trivandrum, in fact, the methodology could be adapted in a way that this critical inquiries can be tweaked a bit. For example, Trivandrum being the capital city of Kerala, and there is an administrative kind of a history along with other historical layers of transformation. So we have molded the questions in such a way that it can be through the lens of these, students can understand the transformation of the city and what could be the architectural gesture. So, and the first two studios that we ran, in the first studio, we actually gave a program, which was an interpretation center. And the second studio, we developed this understanding that, okay, the program also could be developed by students, like an open program. And in the third studio, again, we are like, it's kind of an adaptable process. In the third studio, again, we have specified a program. So basically, this is an adaptable model depending on the context, but largely the methodology will be on archival research mapping, translation, and the responsive project. And the next question, actually, we collaborated with architect Roger Connor, who was a former professor in Cartland, and at present he's a mentor in Avni. So in fact, he collaborated through a workshop where then later he we collaboratively worked on a global studio at Carleton University. In fact, they took the site of Calicut, two sites of Calicut, and they tried to understand these cities from a distant perspective. So that was a kind of an experiment. So how to understand a historical landscape sitting in a very different context. So here archival research and the readings and the literature becomes a major tool. So through which the orientation happens, orientation to the landscape happens. And then through little studies on the reading of urban fabric, then coming to the translational studies are similar for both the students because it's an individual interpretation of the existing data collected. And the responsive program also, they also suggested a open program, which was actually very different from what our students proposed because they had a ground understanding about the critical vernacular, and the other thing was more on a gesture level. Thank you. Hope
Okay,
that
thank you. Thank you very much, Architect Ishara. That answers the questions given. Okay, actually, Prof. Dinesh, you didn't answer one question. Actually, the question is, why is the decoration in the Buddhist influenced temple minimal compared to the standard Shola architecture?
Yeah. See, the Buddhist, they are all minimal in any structure. If you look at of Buddhist architecture, it is minimal. They don't go for ornamental decorations or sculptures, ornamental sculptures, or sculptures in the walls, or sculptures in the pillars. They don't go for it. They go for a very simple and integrate design. So that's what's the influence if you would have seen in the Chola architecture also.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Dinesh.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, we move forward to Dr. Andi, Ibu Andi. Okay, you have two questions from the audience. The first question is regarding the palace in Makassar. Are these old palaces still preserved until today since Indonesia did not maintain kingships? And do these palaces have Dutch influence?
Thank you, Dr. Isaac. The palace in Makassar, exactly Kingdom of Goa, still survive today. And today is to be tourism one of tourism location, and also Until today, the king there is even a king election king of Goa until today. But the next question, the influence, the palace of kingdom of Goa no influence Dutch architecture, just all traditional house Makassar, no influence.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Andi. Another question. Okay, when the Dutch subjugate Makassar, what is the strong influence that the Dutch brought to the architecture or built environment in Makassar?
Okay. Thank you. The environment in Makassar, the Dutch colonial is architecture like before the early Indonesia independent, the architecture to be the Dutch window, and also the roof, the model of roof, and the other in the old city, there have facility about the facility about street furniture, like in Malacca. The architecture have arcade, so the people can street the way in the arcade, the truth in the arcade to pedestrian way, to be pedestrian way. Yeah, but today until in the area the all city have pedestrian way, but the other part very difficult pedestrian way in Makassar. I think that's
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Andi Abida, for the answers. Okay, so we have two more questions for our Dr. Lang. Okay, first question would be, what is the trend of application of solar chimney in Malaysia since the last decades, especially for terrace house?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Izik, for the question. Basically, they are still not that popular applying the solar chimneys in Malaysia, especially for the terrace house. Most of the developers or designers are trying to look into the air wells or the courtyard in this case. So, because in this case, probably they will find out courtyard is not only just for the aesthetic wise, okay, in the same time they also can give more daylightings, and most of the peoples or the occupants nowadays they prefer to use the air conditioning. Hence, this would not be the trend yet, but somehow the by through giving small awareness, okay, on the solar chimneys as well as the importance of the cross ventilations as well as the step ventilations, then that could becomes one of the trends in the future. And currently, most of the trend that have been applying the solar chimney will be on the industry for the power generations or for the special building, like for example, the galleries or independent building that they have some constraints, especially on their context, like in the urbans wise. So this could becomes one of the new tryout, okay, that could be promoted in our housing development or industry in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. PC. Another question for you. Okay, what is the advantage of application of solar chimney compared to air well?
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. Okay, compared to airwell, okay, like this is based on the experience and most of the some of the occupants that I believe that they're having the airwell at home. Okay, you will find out they're trying to close it up with the roof. Okay, and they will just leave it blank or turn it into a utility space. So if we having the solar chimney, as said that it can actually giving you good better ventilation as what have been mentioned in the slide, but in the same time it also can ensure the securities because air wells, the sizes of the openings of the shaft is bigger, that will cause the security issue. Okay, and the other things it will cause that will not as effective compared to the solar chimney. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. PC. So that's all the questions that I got from the audience. Okay, so I think it's time for me to close the Q&A session. We're already at 12:50 p.m. Malaysia time. So I think it's time for our photo session together before we end our event today. Okay, so to all the participants in this room, please open your camera and we need to take a picture. I think IT team, can you help me take a photo? Thank you very much, IT team.
Okay, guys. Can you switch on your cam? Okay. All right. Okay. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Another page. Okay. Second page. All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. I think I've done it. Thank you. Dr. Izik, over to you.
Okay, thank you, our fourth guest speaker. So our IT team. And I would like to say thank you again to Prof. Dinesh Raghavan, okay, Dinesh Anna from VIT, and also Dr. Tishara K from Avani Institute of Design, Dr. Technologist Andi Abdillah from UNM, Universitas Negeri Makassar, and Dr. Technologist Lang Pochung from UTM. So with this, I end our session today. Hopefully, we'll see you guys in the next meeting, be it online webinar or me myself going to either India or Indonesia. So goodbye for now. Sampai jumpa and Romba Nandri. Thank you, everyone. I give this room back to the director. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much all. This is the last final
Thank you.
webinar. So
Yeah.
thank you so much and I hope to see you guys again soon. Dr. Madhu, nice to see you on screen. Prof. Dinesh.
I was there from morning itself, but since I had class, I had to switch off my video.
Yes, it's okay. Nice to meet you, Dr. Madhu, on screen.
Thank
To all
you.
my colleagues, Pak Yusdi, Prof. Sam, Dr. Andi, Architect Tushara, and Prof. Dinesh. Thank you so much. So I'll see you soon again soon in Malaysia in UTM. Okay, sampai ketemu semua. I'll see you. Have a nice day. Take
Yeah.
care.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Assalamualaikum.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye, all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
afternoon.
Bye. Bye. Bye.